there are unintended consequences of DOGE. Lots of unintended consequences. And those unintended consequences are manifesting themselves in those T for Cs.
Welcome, everyone, to the Optimized podcast brought to you by VisibleThread. I'm your host, Jeff Shapiro, and today we're joined by an awesome guest and friend, Blaine Klusky. Say hi, Blaine.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me today. Appreciate it.
So great to have you. So Blaine is the founder and principal of Harkin Advisors. Hopefully I said that right. Where he engages the U.S. government and DoD contractors to drive enterprise growth and profitability through specialized work in strategy, finance, M&A, operations, and risk management. Blaine steps into his various CXO roles as needed and is sought after for his ability to work effectively with regulators and auditors and to drive positive outcomes with DCMA and DCAA. Well, Blaine, awesome to have you today. I got to first ask you, how did you fall into the government contracting community? Did it find you or did you find it?
It found me completely by accident. I spent about 25 years in financial services, securities, banking, wealth management, back when AI meant alternative investments, oddly enough. And somebody tapped me on the shoulder to be CFO of a GovCon. And I was like, sure, okay. Day one, literally, I got a call and a nasty gram from the DCAA about a 7-year-old incurred cost submission that had been deemed adequate. And I said, "What is DCAA?" I couldn't spell DCAA. And then I learned, oh, that's DCMA. Oh, and FAR and DFARS. And I was like, okay, this is going to be a joy and a half. And the person who had previously been there kept thumbing their nose at the DCAA and putting them off. So that kind of caused a bit of a toxic situation. And I said, all right, well, I had lived a very regulated life in my securities and banking, right? Obviously, you have whether it's the SEC or Federal Reserve or going to the UK, the FSA, FCA now, the UK, the Japan FSA. Used to run global operations for AIG's Foreign General Insurance. So I was so used to dealing with regulators, and a regulator is a regulator is a regulator. So I said, well, what was the success I'd always had in dealing with regulated businesses and regulators? It was to understand the regulations. So that began my GovCon reading FAR, DFARS, and understanding the paradigm in which GovCon worked. And then realizing that, gee, GovCon is the only paradigm I can think of in this country where your customer is your regulator and vice versa. Not the same in securities. If there's no regulatory or systemic risk, I should say, the SEC is more than willing to shut you down. The DCAA and DCMA, they really don't want to put people out of business if they're providing good and valuable services to to our defense industrial base. They obviously want to stop outright fraud. So it's very interesting relationship that I realized, and there you go. And I never looked back. And then I said, well, how do we take innovative problem solving that we saw in financial services and even cutting edge aspects of financial services, and bring those innovative techniques of enterprise growth and profitability and regulatory management, and how do we apply them to GovCon? And now I'm here, and I love every minute of it, and I find it very rewarding because at the end of the day, we are serving our nation, we are serving our veterans, we are serving our warfighters, and our mission should always be to make them more survivable and more lethal. And everything that we are doing really should be for that benefit. And there's a purpose, a higher purpose, I believe, in what we do, our clients do, and it's a great mission. So, long answer, short question.
No, I love it. We all have that unique story about why we got into government contracting. And yeah, for me, it's always been the mission. I love the mission, wherever the agency that you're working for, or as a contractor or as an employee, there's a purpose to it, and the federal government helps a lot of Americans clearly, and it's honorable to be able to have that opportunity to help that mission. All right. Well, in case you haven't heard, earlier this year, we had a new president sworn in, and that new president, President Trump, has started the Department of Government Efficiency, the DOGE. So today's session, we're going to talk about DOGE and the impact on the government contracting community. There's only been a handful of presidential executive orders given lots of different policy direction, and whether it's tariffs or procurement, uh, enforcement of Foreign Practices Act, and how that's being impacted. There's a long laundry list, and the DOGE is working fast to deliver on campaign promises to slim down the government. And so clearly that has had a significant impact on government contractors. So Blaine, what have you been seeing, and how have you been advising your clients on how to react to what you're seeing coming out of the DOGE?
Well,
In so many
wow,
different directions, I
that
know.
that is quite the question, and so let's see if we can maybe take this into some bite-sized chunks and
Sure.
start demystifying. Uh, I'm seeing quite the impact of DOGE uh, all over the place. We'll start with the two main ones, which is clients who have had contracts terminated for convenience, T for C, rescinded, uh, and I've seen T for Cs. I've seen T for Cs that were then rescinded, and then I've seen within a 5 business day period the same rescinded T for C come back again as a T for C. And it's like, uh, so that's one way it's manifesting. We'll talk about that. The other way is I have seen clients currently under just regular routine audit for it could be any DCAA audit. It could be an incurred cost submission. It could be a Mar 6 floor check. And candidly, I've seen. Um, uh, I want to be careful how I say this, but I've seen potentially some what could be construed as overreach. And how do you guide your clients? So I generally sit at the right hand of founders, uh, CEOs, boards of uh, GovCons, small to medium size, up to the $200 million revenue generally, and how they're looking to Harkin advisors to say, hey, what should we be doing? How should we be doing it? Because it's different, and what we're seeing is this fear, and fear. What is the old saying? Panic kills. Fear and panic uh, are just terrible uh, emotional states that generally are not helpful. We don't make our best decisions when we are in a fight or flight mode, and that's the way we are wired, right? Fight or flight. So I have seen everything on the spectrum from catatonic to, and obviously there's a little hyperbole there, but catatonic to hair on fire, and none of those work. So what I'm suggesting is be purposeful in what you're doing. Situation, problem, resolution. There's a situation, it's causing a problem. What is the resolution? What are likely outcomes? What are your upside potentials, and what are your downside risks for any action that you take? And I want to take a moment to say, and if there are any regulators out there, I think it's important that we realize we are going through a lot as government contractors and as that industry. But let's also remember that the folks who are managing our contracts, our KOs, COs, our CORs, our TPOCs, they're going through a lot too. And I think if we can go in with that understanding, it makes for much better relationships, and ultimately it's relationships that drive outcomes.
Yeah, I agree. The government is still made up of people. They're not all robots yet. And, having a lot of empathy is going to go a really long way. So when you're negotiating that termination, God forbid, your company's going through that. I mean, it's another person on the other end, right? And going back and forth is important. So talk about a little bit about managing emotions in the C-suite. And you're making those difficult decisions about rifts and other budget cuts. You may have to cut some training, some overhead. You want to talk a little bit about how those decisions are made and
Sure.
yeah.
Sure. So, you know, I've always had a very pragmatic view of regulations, laws, and it's really about the spirit, the intent, and the letter of the law. So, my mantra is always: Are we operating within the spirit, intent, and letter of a regulation, an executive order, a law? And I find, and I have found that generally when you do that, you're going to be okay. So let's start with what is DOGE and why, without being pedantic, needlessly pedantic. What is DOGE the most basic terms? It is supposed to, and again, whatever our opinion on it, and that's the other thing. Well, and we should, let's put in the parking lot about opinions and what people think about it, and various views, and whether or not those are productive to the task at hand. So let's put that as a separate question, if maybe we can make a note of that. But what is DOGE, right? DOGE is about getting rid of fraud, waste, and abuse. So face value, okay, who has a problem with that? Um, so we'll start with, do you believe the services and products that you are providing are they good and valuable? And if they are good and valuable, great. If you believe as an organization they are not good and valuable, perhaps it's time to rethink your business model and what you're bringing to the table. And I mean that sincerely, right? If uh, and I can tell you assuredly, I don't have clients that are not providing meaningful, good, valuable services, products uh, to our warfighters, and it's just not my brand, and it's not really what I do. So let's start with the premise that there are unintended consequences of DOGE. Lots of unintended consequences. And those unintended consequences are manifesting themselves in those T for Cs. So we need to take a step back and first assess, do we believe, in our estimation, this is right or it's wrong within the spirit of what DOGE is trying to do? And again, we don't get to write the rules. That's not, that's not we don't get to write them. We have to play by the rules. The rules change. And, life ain't fair. So I can sit there from today till tomorrow till next year complaining about the rules, which will get me absolutely nowhere. But a pity party where a lot of people, will be together and with a shared understanding that this isn't fair, and we'll be in exactly the same place. Or we can say, what can we do? And I think there's a lot that can be done. How much of it will have impact short term versus medium term versus long term, I think remains to be seen. From what I can gather and what I believe to be happening is we have AI used by DOGE to sniff out uh, certain eh, terms, certain, and again, I'm not in DOGE, so I'm not there, but it stands to reason, certain NAICS codes. We all know in our business, we have however many NAICS codes we have it in our SAM registration. And as our businesses morph and shape in between SAM registrations, potentially we're doing something that might be ancillary to a NAICS code. And NAICS codes really didn't make much of a difference in the past to a certain extent. But now we're seeing NAICS codes like 5416XX, services, management, consulting services that seem to have been caught in this net of dead on arrival, or let's get that out. Words like transitioning. Transitioning doesn't necessarily mean gender transitioning. It could mean transitioning uh, our soldiers and veterans to a veteran status and to civilian life. So I think it's important to take a step back and say, all right, how did this happen? Why did this happen? And now what can we do about it? So let's talk for a second about what can we do about it? Well, let me pause there because I didn't make sure that you're the host, so you might want to ask the questions there.
No, keep going. That's exactly what we want to hear.
Yeah. So I have suggested uh, for let's start with those of us who have not yet had terminations. It would behoove us at this point to go and look at all of our contracts, all of our options. There's a lot of great tools out there now. There's awarded.ai, there's Pwin AI, and you're going to see more and more. And there's proposal writing tools, and of course, there's also Chat GPT. Um, Perhaps it's a good time to go through, whether you're using automated solutions in AI or you're using, pick a team to review. Read your proposals now and your options, and candidly, even your current contracts through the lens of what do we think DOGE is looking for? What might be sniffed out in a broad search, in a Boolean, I guess in the old days we would have called it the old days, a Boolean search, right?
Yes, the old, before Google, the dog pile or whatever it was,
Right.
search. Yes, yeah, yeah. All right, we just showed our ages. Keep going.
Yeah, we do. Well, yes. It's funny how that happens. But perhaps, it's not a bad idea to say, well, okay, if can we identify things in there and say, this is going to be a problem because, well, that was a great word at the time the proposal was written. It doesn't necessarily convey the meat of what this proposal is, and it could hurt us. Well, I think you have opportunities to think about that proactively. I will tell you that if you are writing proposals right now, especially if you're using AI tools, and again, more and more folks are, you should be very thoughtful about taboo words that, and again, when I say taboo, taboo in the context of not our personal beliefs or our value systems, taboo in the context of what we think may be an unintended consequence of DOGE. And it's not about lying. It's not about misrepresenting. In fact, I would always say, do not lie, do not misrepresent. But different things can be interpreted differently. Wording is incredibly important. So choose your words carefully on what you are doing, and also understand the impact of what if this contract is canceled, this option is not is taken, if the option is not taken up, or if the proposal is not accepted. So let's morph into, what if you did have a contract that was terminated, a T for C? What are your options? The first thing I would do is exactly what we just discussed, and now you know exactly which contract to start with. And I have given guidance. Go through, explain very succinctly, what is this contract? What was it supposed to do? And what is the impact? What is the impact of not having this contract? If you are providing valuable work for veteran services, veterans is one that's near and dear to me. 17 to 22 veterans commit suicide every single day in this country. That is a horrible statistic. It is an unacceptable statistic. So if for some reason you have a uh, contract and you can lay hand on heart and say, oh my goodness, this could end up with resulting in dead veterans. Well, we have an obligation, morally and otherwise, to make sure that is understood. Now, it's the how. So let's maybe get into the how. We all have congressional representatives. We all have our project sponsors. There is a way and there's a way. And I always say, don't be that person. Don't be, you know, be the balanced, thoughtful counterparty that understands what your counterparty is going through now and the pressures they have, and try to help them to find solutions. Because let me tell you, the people running these contracts that are being terminated are no happier than you are about the terminations. But I'd also say be a good steward and of the corporate, excuse me, of the taxpayer's dollar. And if you approach it from their shoes, meaning your uh, contract officer officer representative, your TPOC, and you can layer that with the shoes of DOGE and the shoes of the administration, and you have all these different, circles, and if you can find that one slice where there's some common ground, well, now you can have a rational conversation, and ultimately, and by the way, I have seen success with that. I've seen success in the last 10 days with, clients who have taken that rational, unemotional approach and have had, through a lot of hard, honest work, uh, contracts, that were terminated, reversed. And so let me pause there. It was a long answer, but I think there's a lot of meat there.
I love it, Blaine. I think it gets back to where you started in your career, understanding return on investment. That's what a lot of these contracts are. And for you as a company, when you're working with the government, especially, those in DOGE are generally folks who are, let's call them government outsiders. They don't, they bring a fresh perspective to how the federal government should be run. They want to understand, was your contract, hey, let's spend the remaining amount of our budget so we can make sure we can substantiate our budget for next year? Or was it a true, you know, statutory need? That's one thing. Or, what were you doing to make the agency better that you're serving? And so just like how, individual government employees, are or weekly, substantiating, what productivity they did for the week, it's not too different for the contractors to say, hey, listen, yeah, I'm not just a butts and seats contractor, but I'm the one that's answering all the calls from those distressed veterans, making sure that we're going to see them back at the VA hospital center next week to make sure they're getting all the medications they need. So to your point, the lives you've saved, the dollars you save, the war fighters you've kept safe, all this information can be articulated and presented based on your past performance and what are you going to do going forward. And there's an old audit saying that we get trapped in is, oh, we're just going to do the same as last year, Sally. If you're a contractor that's just like, yep, we were awarded this 4 years ago, and we're just here to continue to provide systems engineering and technical analysis. Yeah,
Yeah.
expect to be. But what have you done that is but that's not to say that all CETA should be cut. The defend the spend for all these consultants, Blaine. Have you had to write any that?
It's such an important point, and again, I've gotten to know a lot about. I've gotten through my career now to learn about everything from solid state hydrogen energy and fuel cell technology to cybersecurity, offensive and defensive cybersecurity, to drone manufacturing and signal intelligence, to services for veterans, and uh, we are in a time of, I would say this is a bit of a swan event if you look at what's happening with all the change. Change, in some ways, I guess there's the old saying, all change is good. But remember that uh, people see all change as loss. And anybody who's been in an organization, the first thing that happens, whether it's a reorg, is change. How does change affect me? It's going to be, is it loss of a job? Is it loss of a title? Is it loss of status? Is it loss of power? All change is loss. All right. So let's remember that when we look at all the different moving pieces now, we have change that is occurring within our organizations and the emotion that goes along with that. We have change in an administration, whether you like that administration or you hate that administration is irrelevant. That is the administration. Again, those are the rules. And then we have we'll call it the end client, and the end client, and then the regulators and auditors, DCAA, DCMA, and they're all, they all have a lot going on right now. So how do we bring structure and clarity to that ambiguity? And that's a big part of what Harkin tries to do in its practice. Um, Crisis brings about opportunity. Change brings about opportunity. And we've seen it, let's go back through your career and my career. Any major event has created opportunity. It is incumbent upon us and our clients and us as advisors to advise our clients. How do we take advantage in a good way? How do we, well, say, I'll use the word capitalize. It's not a dirty word. How do we capitalize on change, and be a leader in change and be on the leading edge of change? And again, as long as you're adding value, there's nothing wrong with it. We should be proudly adding value, and as leaders in our industry, we should carry the flag and say, okay, and by the way, there'll be another administration, and then another administration, and another administration. But the one thing I am acutely aware of, and I believe in my heart of hearts, is that the government of the United States of America is not going anywhere and will continue to need good and valuable services and products. And maybe it shifts where, how are they being produced, and how are they being sourced, and how are they being sold, and so it's a good time to look at our own operating structures, our own pricing. The government will want to get, and we've seen this over the last several decades. The days of the $8,000 hammer and toilet seat are gone, right? Uh, they want the best pricing and the best value. So how do we, as organizations, ensure that we are able to provide the best value, and run efficiently? And a lot of that goes to understanding profitability drivers of our own organizations. And one of the things I've seen is a lot of organizations, particularly on the smaller side, and even the middle size, struggle with understanding, with obtaining data and understanding data and actioning data, right? What is the data that drives us? And obviously, with government contracting, we have, it's not just GAAP, we have GAGAS, and we have uh, our uh, rates and our G&A and our overhead and our cost pools, and understanding what we're doing now and how that's going to impact cost pools, and how that's going to impact our rates, and how it's going to impact future proposals and work, and winning or losing work in a competitive dynamic is everything. So, how are we working with our partners within our organizations, our chief financial officers, who really should be providing i- data that is usable, timely, accurate, and meaningful data, and not just in the rearview mirror, but hypothetically forecasting what might this look like? What's our base case? What's our best case? What's our worst case? And what are we going to do? And the last thought before I turn it over to you for the next question is have a plan, because if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. So
Yeah.
have a plan and decide now, how long will you give that plan to work? And if it doesn't work, when will you pivot and how will you pivot? Because if the plan does not go the way you want that plan to go and you have to pivot, that is again another crisis, and it will be filled with emotion at that time. Planning in advance helps you to take away that emotion and make better decisions, particularly if those decisions involve furloughing or laying people off, to be able to have that conversation now and say, this is what we're going to do. We think this is going to work. It's going to drive enterprise growth and profitability. And if it works, great. If it doesn't work, well, we know now in 6 months, and we're going to continue to measure it along the way. But in the 3 months is a, hey, how's it going? 4 months is, do we think we're going to make it? 5 months is, we're getting pretty close. But then we know today and day zero that at the 6 month mark, if it hasn't achieved what we needed to, or at whatever other metric that we've determined at a point in time, these are the actions, discrete actions that we will take. If you can do that, then you are managing the business. The business is not managing you.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. I think let's explore this a little bit more. You talked a bit about, rethinking what services that you're providing, how you provide it. Maybe that's, to your word, pivoting. Maybe you're concentrated in the civilian sector. Are there opportunities in the defense sector that you didn't realize exist? Or maybe as we all know, the defense the defense complex itself is very complex, and there are so many different agencies. If you play in the Navy, there's plenty more to be done at the Army. There's plenty more to be done at other services. So understanding, what needs they have and getting out there and networking and, so many ways to pivot. So from a reorganizational standpoint, there's both operations and then there's the back office stuff that you've seen. Talk a little bit more about approaches to pricing. Are you changing how you price? Are you changing the narrative on, are you trying to figure out like OTAs? Are you trying to figure out these other unique agreement vehicles for you to do business with the government? Like, how do you explore all that? Do you have any perspective on that?
Like I think everything is on the table, and innovative problem solving and thinking is about not what, to your point, what did we do last year and how did we do it, but what are uh, the options? Who is buying what, where, and how? Because ultimately, that's how markets are made. There are buyers and there are sellers. And it is not incumbent upon the buyers to say, hey, why don't we do it this way solely? It is also incumbent upon, I mean, you want to be a good counterparty. You want to be a good provider. You want to be a partner to your customers. And I don't care what industry you're in. I don't care who the customer is. I don't care if it's B2C or B2B or B2G, right? Make it easy and pleasant to do business. Be a leader in problem solving, and call up and ask your counterparty, hey, would this be helpful? Or maybe, how about, hey, how can I help you? I understood that this must be the most horrible time. I know what you guys are going through. How can we be a good partner? Is there anything that we can do at this point? And remember, transactions come and go. Relationships, meaningful relationships, are for life. And meaningful relationships are meaningful because they are or they have to be sustainable, and to be sustainable, they have to be mutually beneficial. And, you know, it's very hard when somebody's going through a tough thing, to call up. We've all known people who've lost jobs, and, uh, be the person who calls up and says, "Hey, I'm really sorry. What can I do to help you?" Yeah, call up your counterparty and say, "Hey, what's going on?" And by the way, the same applies to our regulators and our auditors. Think about what they're going through, and I have a meeting coming up for an audit where I literally have 6 auditors for a standard audit. That's new to me. I've never seen 6 auditors, come in for a small business, and I can imagine what some of the drivers might be on that. Eh, maybe it's just very, very, very complex subject matter. Uh, but I wanna be empathetic to the position, and it's okay to call up and say to your partner, and when I say partner, I have this view of collaboration. We collaborate with counterparties. We collaborate with our auditors. We collaborate with our regulators. They're not our enemies. And it's true, maybe they're not your friend, but don't make them your enemy. There are do's and don'ts, and there's a protocol when dealing with these counterparties. Um, and yeah, I've had very candid conversations where I said, "Hey, you don't want to come to work to get heartburn every day. The team over here doesn't want to come and get heartburn every day. So why don't we just do what we can to get everything done as efficiently as possible, as politely as possible, and uh, and because you have a job to do, and I respect, and I've used these words, I respect that you have a job to do, and I'm gonna do what I can to make it, to make that easier. Now, to be fair, there are times, and we've all been there, where there is overreach, and it is our responsibility, uh, and often our fiduciary obligation to be thoughtful about how we communicate. Hey, we have to operate within the FAR and the DFARs, and every audit has an audit program. These are not just wanderlust where you just get to come in and decide what you want to do today on an audit. There are very specific, and they're all available. And happy if you give me a call if you haven't uh, thought about this and you are in the middle of an audit or expecting an audit. Uh, you should understand how that audit is going to be performed, what the ground rules are for the auditor. It's not a game of hide the ball. Understand the rules of the game if you are going to win the game or at least get to the finish line. And there is a way, and there is a way. And even when sometimes you have to assert yourself a bit, you can assert yourself in a way that makes you a jerk and really unpleasant, and that person they never want to hear from. Or you could be kind and respectful and reasonable. And what I have learned in my sort of 30 or some odd years is that most, people are people. Treat people with dignity and respect, and you tend to get it back. And at the end of the day, the hardest part of what we do is people. It's people, right?
Correct.
It's
Correct.
not, and well, let's put aside science and technology and rocket science, some of those things where you have limitations of science. But generally, for any of us who work in organizations or with organizations, what makes us successful or not are the people. So let me pause there.
Love it. Yeah. So thank you, Blaine. Hopefully, for those who are listening who are being audited by Cone Resnick on behalf of its civilian agency partners, take Blaine's advice into heart. You know, we're just doing our job. Yeah, you sign contracts that have that FAR 52 clause that says government has a right to audit. And so, yeah, I spend a significant amount of my days. That's my job as a federal contract auditor. And we're not looking to get you. And most auditors are not looking to get you. To Blaine's point, we both have a mission to serve, and it's to get the most out of your taxpayer money. And so to your point, Blaine, let's talk about this more. Let's go down this road. I mean, DOGE is all about accountability, right? How is that money being spent? Is it being spent within the regulation? Is it being effectively spent? Granted, I want to be very forthcoming with what DCAA and other contract auditors are all about. We're not efficiency auditors. We're not in to see if dollars are being spent effectively and efficiently. That's the job of Inspector General, Inspectors General Office. They'll do those kind of performance audits and seeing, if missions are met and doing performance metrics and measuring what was in this SOW against what was produced by the contracted contractor. But that nevertheless, still very important for contractors to show how fiduciary responsible they are and making sure that costs claimed on a contract are allowable, properly allocable, and reasonable. So talk more about that, Blaine.
Sure.
So I you know,
Yeah. So I have a something I've been using for my financial services times and days, and it's been updated and amended. But it's interesting. I go back to early iterations, and it's pretty much the same. And they are do's and don'ts when dealing with auditors. And there's nothing hanky panky. Candidly, it is written with truth. And it's written that if any auditor or any regulator got a copy, they would look at it and say, yeah, that's kind of reasonable. I could get behind that. And some of them are, while intuitive, you have to remember, again, it's about the people. You have a Mars 6 floor check. People haven't necessarily been through that. Whoever they pick for that sample, people get nervous. People are
so
nervous about their
yes,
jobs, okay?
yes,
And let's say, and by the way, let's remember, we have top performers, we have, middle, we have maybe not as good, and there's gonna be a cross section, and you already have somebody who's maybe concerned, who's maybe sick, not feeling well today, has a headache, they had a fight with their spouse, their children's sick. It could be any people are people. And by the way, the auditor might have had some of those same things. And then you get in a room and says, so tell me, how do you correct your timesheet? Right? Or so tell me what you're working on now. All right. And one of these people might be an engineer. And you know, don't tell them they wouldn't understand it. Never tell an auditor, because my answer to that is, tongue in cheek. Okay, dumb it down for me. All right. They have a job to do. They're doing the best they can. So you can sit there and you can make that auditor feel really stupid and that you're really smart and have all the answers. How's that going to work out for you? Or you can understand they need perspective. But there's a way to answer questions and there's a way to prepare. And again, it's not about we don't hide things. We don't never hide, uh, never be untruthful. Always make statements that could be, they're going to transcribe it into writing, and you should be making truthful statements. But at the same time, if the question is a yes no, answer yes no, not well. Let me tell you what happened 6 months ago.
not story time. Yes,
It's
exactly.
not story time. It's not confessional. Um, and and there are common ways that people get tripped up, and it's a lot of my practice as well. Sometimes I'll run um, mock interviews just to get people comfortable. But ultimately, if you have a well-controlled environment, then it shouldn't be an issue. If you don't have a well-controlled environment, well, maybe it's time to start thinking about how do I have a well-controlled environment? It doesn't take a genius to realize if you're getting audited on one thing now and there are significant deficiencies or weaknesses, well, there's a good chance you're going to have a follow-on audit. Also, for the contractors out there who have had great growth, and that's good fortune, remember, it's a double-edged sword. Um, you're doing cost plus contracts, you are going to all of a sudden, when you get to a certain threshold, or phenomenal growth, or the composition of that portfolio in cost plus versus FFP, you're going to be on the radar of DCAA. And it's important to prepare for that. And by the way, not to prepare for it because the regulator is going to give me a test. Prepare for it because that's our obligation as government contractors. When
Bingo.
we get into that business, we have obligations. And I can tell you, some of my clients have just done the most brilliant jobs of doing a GovCon 101 for everybody, need it or not. They've rolled out great training. It's not as hard as you might think. I mean, I've seen some really impressive trainings from some of my clients. It's to get people understanding their obligations, and starting with time and attendance and timekeeping. It's a good time to go through those things. And remember, if you are going through an audit right now, that auditor may well have received an email saying, "Tell me the 5 things you did last week." Let's also remember that depending on the size of the audit, you might be in the middle of a 6-month audit, and you might be the bulk of what that auditor is doing. How is that auditor going to, and now again, we're talking, for example, DCAA. How is that auditor going to answer that email? "Dear Elon, here are the 5 things I did last week. I was at company X." Okay? They have a job to do, like it or not. So help them be successful in their job. If you're running a good shop and you're doing everything you should be doing, okay. Um, Again, there's a way and there's a way, but empathy goes a long way.
100%. So talk a little bit more about being proactive. So the audit's going on, you see there's some troubles in your system. Going through that incurred cost audit, you see some costs being potentially questioned. Can you talk about the importance of being proactive and showing, you know, sometimes it's okay to admit that you made a mistake. Hey, that was before me. Back then our controls weren't as good, but here's how the controls are now. You want to talk a little? Do you have any stories
Yeah,
along those
yeah,
lines?
and again, it's about the narrative, and if any listeners are interested, I mean, interested. This is we could spend a whole session on this, and I'm happy to help. But ultimately, um, there is a narrative. There is a story. When I say a story, it's not an untruth. There's an understanding. Why are you here? How did you get here? You mentioned it's before me, and obviously the organization is the organization. But um, Cohen Resnick is a firm of audit with lots of auditors. There is a difference between a deficiency or even a significant deficiency that has been uh, uh, caught and resolved because now okay, it's going well now. Now let's just make sure that while that significant deficiency existed, was anybody harmed? And then, right, there's a change in the scope of exercise because if you have a significant deficiency that is uncovered that has not been resolved, well, now they have to worry about not just what they're auditing from FY 22, 23, or whenever, but 24 and 25 now is something they have to be worried about as well. So if there's something that, it's okay sometimes to say, yeah, you know, we, we recognize that, this particular thing happened. Again, it's not confessional, but don't lie. Don't insult people's intelligence. If it comes down to it, either you have remediated it or you will remediate it right away. Okay. It's never about, and please don't tell the auditor, well, this really isn't material, because materiality exactly right. It's not material. Um, Materiality is not our judgment as those who are audited. Materiality is at the sole discretion of who is auditing. You may ask them, do you think this is material? Is this, in your opinion, is this material? One of the things I try to do is help my auditors to be successful at what they're doing. Starting with, let's go back to what we said earlier. There is a program for all audits, and they're number coded. It's a 5-digit number, 11070. Okay, and which I believe is the incurred cost submission audit. And so you can read through one for large business, one for small business, and you kind of know what they're looking for. So if you know what you're looking for, why not do a kickoff and prepare a lot of kind of so you can give a narrative. Here's where we are. Here's what we've done that addresses it. Where at least that you're giving knowledge. You're sharing with the auditor. We understand the rules of the game, and we know what's going on. And by the way, for those of you in your small and medium businesses, uh, whoever's fielding the audit, have a senior executive come to that kickoff, even if it's just for 5 minutes. And I've done this with the founders and the CEOs. Come for 5 minutes. And I have a great client who showed up at a kickoff and said, I really just want to thank you guys for coming here today. We really appreciate it. We think we're running a pretty good shop, but we could always improve. And if you find things that, need improvement, let us know. My commitment to you is I'm going to work to improve them. That means so much. If it's said in sincerity, if it's genuine and it's sincere, it means a lot. Don't say it if you don't mean it. And the fact that there is that senior executive level of engagement is helpful. I will also tell you, this is a plug, there is an advantage often to having someone external, such as Harkin Advisors, come and help you through that, because there is a bit of a buffer. Sometimes I don't know I'll say in most cases, I can't possibly know your business as well as you do. Although the longer I know clients, the better I know the businesses. But sometimes it is effective as I'm dealing with them, to then with the auditors, to then it's okay when the CEO might occasionally overrule something that I have said or a position I have taken. You can't overrule yourself when you're the business when you've said something. Once you make a statement, it's on record. You can kind of maybe change your mind on it. It's only so often you can do that. And that's one of the roles that Harkin Advisors plays, which is, hey, and look, I will always operate in good faith on behalf of the client. You're not there to tell stories, but you are there to help. Sometimes it is about context. Context is incredibly important. Wording is incredibly important. And there's a million moving pieces, and understand how they all go together, and make it easy. So, that's a big part of my practice, and you get better as an organization. The more
Love it.
audits
Uh,
you go through.
No, no, no. So I'm gonna ask you the difficult question here. When you're submitting or when you're assisting an organization submit their annual incurred cost submission for flexibly priced contracts in the federal government, are you expecting, are you submitting 100% compliant submission? Meaning, are you 100% or are you purposely trying to be 100% sure that all the costs in that submission are allowable costs?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. Listen, my guidance, and I'm conservative in this way, is, and again, I had another client, and this is when I know I get a sense for who my client is and kind of people and their level of integrity. When I have the CEO and founder of a 20-year-old business who's stuck on, is this $600 expense from a conference allowable, or is it marketing expense? And and if you say it is, well, prove to me why it is. That's somebody who cares. That is a senior leader who says, I really want to get this right. And look, does every dollar count? Yes, every dollar counts. But when in doubt, if you it when in doubt, throw it out. I mean, really, do you want to say, always say, if the regulator comes and asks, okay, what do I want to say? So first of all, yes, you have to have adequate submissions. Okay. And obviously, but yeah, you should not be submitting submissions with inappropriate costs. Assume you're going to be audited. Um, So, and yeah, to me, I don't think, but you thought that was an interesting answer. So let me turn that around and ask you.
No, go ahead. You can
What do
ask
you,
ask
what do you
ask
think?
the
I mean,
host.
well, how do you advise clients? I mean, do you say on these flexibly priced contracts, what is your guidance to them on that ICS, on the ICE model? Uh, are 100% of the costs allowable?
Yeah. So I talk to my clients about risk tolerance, right? And I talk about how FAR 31 has a lot of gray. So I will never advise a client to try putting through an expressly unallowable cost, because if you put through an expressly unallowable cost, not only do you owe back the cost that you claim, but you're going to owe a penalty at least one time that amount. So you will be hitting the bottom line doubly. Was it really worth it? However, for the gray costs, marketing is a good field to talk about. Providing food, depending on the situation, very gray area. I'm not here, like I said, I'm encouraging anyone listening to this to always push the envelope, but it's going to depend on the executives. Blaine, to your effect, to my government contractor auditor hat, I'm thrilled to hear that. You take a very conservative approach, certain, executive compensation. We say, hey, listen, that probably sounds like profit sharing. I could probably argue to you why it's not and how to do that. But you know what? Out of abundance of caution, we're just going to pay it out of our profits and not going to try claiming it. Could I make it allowable? Maybe, but we take a very conservative approach here at XYZ Company. Same thing with, when we bring people in to get them together, we have all day conferences where we want to talk about, how do we succeed here? How are we going to build business? A lot of that can be construed. Is that allowable? Or are we trying to build morale? When we go out bowling afterwards, am I going to charge that? All that kind of stuff. There's a lot of nuance to it. So I would never, ever, ever, as an advisor, say, listen, push through all the costs you can. And if you get penalized, oh well. No, that's a pretty bad attitude, and that's going to invite a lot more regulation and oversight. Go ahead.
Okay,
Go
so
ahead.
now I'm going
Well,
to talk out of the other side of my mouth for a second. I'm glad I
please.
asked you that question because it's going to change my answer. When you said, "Are they all 100% allowable?" and I said, "Yes, I'm conservative." Um, when you talk about the ambiguity of the FAR and the risk tolerance, you are absolutely right. There are some you can say, "Okay, I can see this." That's when I go to the Judge Judy test, and the Judge Judy test, you could all hear Judge Judy saying, "Am I stupid?" All right? It's the Judge Judy, "Am I stupid?" test. So when you on that gray area, you have to say to yourself at that time, and by the way, and document why. If it's gray and you're making the decision to put it through, document it. And I'll tell you why. Because by documenting it, you've gone through a thought process, and there is a difference between malice and impropriety. And hey, I made a judgment call. It might have been wrong. I did it thoughtfully. I consulted ConResic. I consulted Harkin Advisors. I went out of my way to have the conversation. You will never, is my belief, never have punitive damages for trying to be a good custodian of the taxpayers' money. Never. If you could show this is why I did it, this is what I thought, and you were wrong. Okay, you're wrong. Maybe you're gonna have to pay it back. But it's when people do things that you just it's like, come on. If you're sitting there saying, "Yeah, it's gonna be hard for me to defend this," well, you ought not do it. I wanna touch on one more point, though, that we should have done
Please.
earlier because I
That's
know
okay.
we're running against time, and that is we talked about the do's and not to do's and DOGE. Um, this is a time a lot of people are having uh, meetings with their entire organizations and Zoom meetings. um, let's remember that again, let's just think about, is this being recorded? How does this look? How does this sound? And let's act honorably. Sitting there and bashing this party or that party, whether it's an administration or a a client, it doesn't have a good look. It's not productive. And the answer that dialogue has to be shut down immediately with, "Hey, folks, we are where we are. We didn't write the rules. Let's be productive and let's figure out a way to be helpful to all parties." And I've seen some of those start to go down a path that's not helpful. And please, people, please, 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 could we not post things on our LinkedIn out of anger? And yes, it happens, and I'm watching it happen now. And it's like, really? Why would you do that? How do you think that's going to work out for you? What is the upside potential? What is the downside risk? So I think emotions run high, and when emotions run high, people sometimes don't act in the most effective manner. So I would say that that's the other part that I wanted to get out. It's a good time to take stock in what are we communicating, how are we communicating it, and let's bring calm and an air of, you know, let's manage the business, not have the business manage us. We can only control what we could control, and you can take the victim approach or the responsibility approach. I'm responsible, and I will do the best I can to drive the best outcomes I can.
I love it, Blaine. I mean, geez, I was gonna sit here and let's make sure we talk about the takeaways that everyone should get from today's podcast. But I think you got a good chunk of it. Look, this is turbulent times for everyone. We talked about that. It's not just the companies who are receiving the stop work orders or the terminations. It's for the people who work for the agencies where their cubicle mates have been let go because they were with the government for a year and a half and that wasn't long enough, or they were told to take a fork in the road. A lot of difficult decisions. You've talked about, you're looking at what you're writing in your proposals. Compare it against with the language that's in executive orders and other policies that are out there. Are you saying phrases and themes that the current administration wants to steer away from? You Relook at your value proposition. Understand how to phrase that to your customers. If your contract has not been terminated yet, you're providing consulting services, be proactive. This is the time to say, listen, before you decide to take any action, I want to make sure you understand the value that we provide to your agency. And here are several examples that you can send up to the secretary's office to help defend this spend on my contract. So I couldn't agree more. I don't know. And then regulators, they're not going to stop. The accountability is going to continue to increase. You're going to get more questions from your contracting officer. You're going to get more questions from auditors. Again, it goes back to the empathy theme you talked about, Blaine, and they have a job to do. They have to ensure that the taxpayer monies are being spent wisely and spent according to the rules. And yeah, is there a little bit of bent on, making sure they're in alignment with the new directives in those executive orders? Yeah, you just have to recognize that and understand it. And then to your points also about owning up when maybe you didn't spend it on the right thing, or they caught something that, maybe they shouldn't have, or they recognize that an internal control isn't working as it intended. Say, you know what? You're right. That wasn't working right, but this is what we're doing now to fix it. Blaine, anything else to add for our listeners or making sure that they should take away from today's podcast?
No, just these are tough times. This too shall pass. We'll get past the firefighting, but you do have to be able to survive long enough to do that. And happy to speak with anybody who wants to talk about any of the things we've talked about. And drive your business. Don't let your business drive you. And remember, it's really be empathetic at this time. And remember what people are going through and the uncertainty in your own organization, not to mention all of the counterparties you deal with, and and just be kind to people. Just be kind.
Love it. Love it. Well, with that, I think we need to end things. I'm Jeff. He's Blaine. Find us on LinkedIn. Give us some feedback. What did you think of today's episode? We would love to take questions. Blaine, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a thrill to talk.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for listening. See you next time.